Andrew Westoll is a primatologist storyteller who has been on an incredible journey with the chimpanzee family. His story will shock you, move you to tears, and make you think deeply about our complicated relationship with big apes. Andrew Westoll has written a tremendously important book about his adventures in a chimp house in Quebec. It is nonfiction. It is up for the BC National Award for Canadian Nonfiction at noon today. It is called The Chimps of Fauna Sanctuary, a Canadian story of resilience and recovery. It is my pleasure to welcome Andrew Westoll to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hiya.
Hiya. So did you bring me a chimpanzee?
I don't. We typically frown upon such things.
I can understand that because I hear tell they're pretty big and they're pretty smelly and they're a little unpredictable.
And pretty strong, and I'm not sure they would like it in here. Yeah, they need it to be a little warmer. Really? Yeah.
Even under the lights?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so primatologist, you once said it's a fancy word for someone who studies monkeys.
That was me. That was me. When I was 23, I got the dream job of any young biology graduate. I was dropped off in the middle of the upper Amazon rainforest for a year to live with a few other people like me to begin studying troops of monkeys that would pass through the forest. And we lived there for a year and I named over 100 monkeys, got to know who was friends with whom, and sort of started learning the ins and outs of primatology.
A certain type of monkey?
Capuchin monkey, brown capuchin monkeys.
They're pretty.
They are pretty, and they're the chimpanzees of the New World.
Really?
Did you know that?
But small? I didn't.
They're very, very smart. They actually do the first stages of tool use. They do that in the wild.
How much of our DNA do they have? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's got to be north of 95. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And I thought you were chasing a blue frog or something too.
You know what? That was when I went back. That was when I went back to Suriname 5 years later, and I went on a journey, a search for a tiny blue frog that lives just in the south of Suriname. It's the only place it lives.
And you wrote about it.
I did. I wrote my first book, The River Bones, about my search for this frog.
When you decided to commune with chimpanzees, did you have a book in mind? How did it begin?
You know, I had a magazine article in mind, and I sold it to The Walrus, which we all know and love.
Great magazine.
And I came home that day and I told my wife that I'd just sold this article, and she said, "That's not a magazine article, that's your next book."
And she was right.
And I took her advice. And a couple of months later, I'd had a couple of phone calls with Gloria Grow, the incredible woman who started Fauna. And I was invited to move in to the sanctuary.
Why did she start Fauna? Tell me a little bit about her. I know she was in the dog and cat rescue business.
So Gloria Grow she had the most successful dog salon on the south shore of Montreal. And by the salon, yeah, clipping, grooming, all of that stuff. And by the time she reached, I think, around the age of 40, she started to feel like she needed to do something much more audacious in the name of animal welfare. She joined all the animal welfare groups on the planet, it seems. And then she found out about a small family of chimpanzees that were, their lab was about to be shut down in Upper New York State. And she decided to try to give them a home and a retirement.
And imagine her husband's reaction. He's a veterinarian, right?
He is.
When she calls him and says, "Dear, I'd like to bring chimpanzees to Quebec."
To their hobby farm.
To the hobby farm.
Yeah.
With the donkey and the horses. And
the pot-bellied pigs.
Yes.
And his reaction was not the reaction most of us would have given. His reaction was, what do I need to do?
How great is that?
Pretty incredible.
Dr. Richard Allen. Plus he's a veterinarian, and I'm sure he was curious. What was happening to these chimpanzees?
So they were in a laboratory, biomedical laboratory, and they were, when a chimp's in a laboratory, they're taken from their mothers just days after they're born, and soon enough they're starting to have their blood drawn, and they're being injected with lethal human viruses and our attempts at vaccines to those viruses. And they're used as medical test subjects to try to cure human diseases.
And everything from HIV/AIDS, Hep C.
All of those are the main ones. The Chimps of Fauna, the first chimps that were retired to Fauna, are the first HIV-positive chimpanzees in history to be retired to Sanctuary. And now the HIV is gone from their blood, so they actually have a clean bill of health.
Are they on the cocktail, or how does that work?
It's just chimpanzees don't react the same way to HIV, which originally was why they thought this might work. Turns out the science was a total failure.
So just maybe we shouldn't be experimenting on chimpanzees.
Absolutely.
Just maybe.
I think more than just maybe.
We shouldn't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's the activist in you, and I know it grew stronger.
Mm-hmm.
How many apes there now?
So now there's 12. There's 12 chimps there. And when
And
I was living
originally?
there, so she's given a home to 19. A few of them come from zoos, but the vast majority come from this laboratory.
And some, didn't one come from somebody thought they could raise it, didn't have a child, thought they could raise a chimpanzee?
A few of them were cross-fostered. That's what it's called, to be raised as a human child in a home. A few of them were cross-fostered. So the confusion and sort of culture confusion started for them as babies. And it's hard to tell who was luckier, the ones that were raised as human babies and the ones that were raised in the laboratory, in terms of the way it would affect them psychologically. It's tough. I would say probably the lab was worse, though.
So you volunteered.
I volunteered.
To go there.
Yeah.
And did they accept you right away? You have the credentials, you've got the degree.
They don't know anything about credentials, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm just a tall, bearded, loud guy who's moving into their home. So originally, just a couple of the chimpanzees were sort of comfortable with me at first. They're very territorial. This has been their home for 12 years. And a new guy is coming in. So I was greeted by most of them with sort of aggression and shock and panic and who is this guy? But slowly over time, I knew the only way to win them over, and I just know this because of my background, was to take part in their life and start working with them and for them. And so I started making their breakfast.
Of course. How close had you been to a chimpanzee before your first day on the job?
Probably as close as you or any of your viewers at a zoo. I'd never been to Africa. I'd never seen chimps in the wild. And the closest I'd been was in a zoo. Yeah.
Or watching them on film. Dr. Jane Goodall has been here a few times, and I've talked about chimpanzees. I don't think I've ever seen one. Maybe I have. I'm not sure I have.
I don't know that there are any in zoos in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what did you know about primal fear before you stepped foot? And what is it like, a hotel or what?
It's a cross between a maximum security prison, a daycare center, an old folks home, and a New York deli at the lunchtime rush.
Okay.
That's essentially Gloria's spiel about the place.
So, the smells,
It's chaos. When you first walk in, the first thing you're struck by is the noise and the smell. It's this mixture of sort of rotting vegetable, musk, and obviously feces from the animals, and it smells like a zoo, but there's something extra going on. The heat is cranked way up and the air is thick, and you hear the pounding, which is called the welcoming committee.
I see.
When they know that someone new is in their home, they start pounding the walls and shaking some of the caging. But the place is divided up.
So there are cages.
Exactly.
To be clear.
There's human areas in the chimp house, and there's mostly chimpanzee areas. And so they're divided by caging, of course. You never one-on-one with a chimpanzee unless there's caging between you. But the chimps have all these tunnels, a labyrinth of tunnels, huge playrooms to play in, big climbing structures to play on, places to hide and have privacy, and then 3 outdoor islands that are surrounded by a moat, because you may not know, chimps can't swim. Did you know that?
No, I know I'm not a good swimmer, so I must have more chimpanzee in me than some, perhaps.
More
but
than
they share
98.6,
what?
I
How
guess.
much of our DNA?
98.6.
98.6 of our DNA, and they can't swim. They can
can't swim.
climb. They can somersault.
Yep.
Now I know you had to go through a few safety lectures. What did they tell you? They gave you a walkie-talkie.
They gave me a walkie-talkie. I always had to have that on my belt. And nothing really safety-wise has really gone on at Fauna, but they need these precautions in place because, as we know, chimps can be very violent when they get panicked and anxious. And in the event that one of them got out of their enclosures, which is highly unlikely, there needs to be a protocol in place. So in the early days, even the school nearby, near the sanctuary,
The elementary school
had a chimp drill protocol in place. And if they heard the siren coming from the sanctuary, there was a certain they would get all the kids into the gymnasium.
Okay, not duck and cover. That wouldn't work because chimpanzees are very clever and they could find you under your desk if they wanted to.
And they can pick locks. But the fact is, I don't want to dwell too much on that because these chimpanzees are incredibly institutionalized. They would never go running off into the forest and into the subdivisions, you know, nearby. The first thing they would most likely want to do when they get out is get back in.
Okay, so it's not like the movies.
No, not at all.
You said in this beautiful book, The Chimps of Fauna Sanctuary, that first you dream about chimps. This is a primatologist, right?
Right.
First you dream about them. Then you see yourself in a new light.
Yeah.
And because of them. And then you're searching for some kind of message from them. When we come back, we'll talk about that, and then we'll meet Binky and Jethro and
Great.
Chance.
Sounds good.
And who's the one who wears the beads?
That's Sue Ellen, Susie Goose.
Sue Ellen. Susie Goose, of course she wears the beads. And I'm anxious to meet Binky, whose nickname is the Bub.
The Bubster.
He's the trickster, right?
Indeed.
Okay, we'll come back.